Hello, and welcome to the agenda. Sorry, we had a couple of technical problems there. That doesn't normally happen to us. But hello. I'm Graham Hughes, and joining me this afternoon, Phil Morehouse from A Different Bias. How you doing, Phil?
I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yep.
How the Tories doing?
Very poorly.
Very poorly. How do you think about your bet on it being a spring election?
I mean,
do you still think it's completely gone now, or do you think
it's not completely gone? He ruled out May the 2nd, which means there's now only a 50% chance it's May the 2nd, and he hasn't ruled out any other day in May or April or June or July or anything. The thing is, it depends what he wants to do, because one thing we don't know is, because there's Rishi Sunak, the man who just wants to make a lot of money for himself, and then there's Rishi Sunak, the leader of the Tory party, who's also trying to at least limit the damage for them in the election. And we don't know how much Sunak, there's so many threads to this. Like, say, the India trade deal, there's obviously been a big push for that this week. Now, the other thing I'll point out is Rishi Sunak, so yesterday evening, knackered all of our, he knackered Tan's video, he knackered my video, I had to redo it this morning. And by announcing that there would be no election on May the 2nd, or no general election on May the 2nd. He did say election, but he meant general election. And yet he couldn't do that for the rest of the week. This speculation was building up all week. All week, it was absolutely fever pitch. And the fact that Sunak refused to rule out May the 2nd all week, it was like, well, why wouldn't he do that? So you can imagine that he was actually intending to go for May the 2nd. And yesterday said no. Now, then we think, so if we go with that as a working hypothesis, what could have caused it? There was a big push this week. He had a conversation personally with Modi, Prime Minister of India. Modi tweeted out something supportive, and you think, so there was a big push for that India trade deal, but there's no announcement. We know that the India general elections will be kicking off quite soon. So once that happens, it'll be then too late. So maybe Sunak has decided that he now has to delay. Maybe it's all it's about for him. Maybe all it is about is this India trade deal, and he's having to delay announcing the election until he gets it. Maybe it's something to do with the Rwanda plan. I think the Rwanda plan is a millstone around his neck. It's an absolute albatross. But maybe
they're going to give £3,000 £3,000 to people to go to Rwanda.
Yeah, that's the new Rwanda.
They're going to send people to Rwanda on holiday for £3,000.
Well, no, they're not allowed to come back. But but he just, so maybe he thinks he can get some traction out of the Rwanda plan. But that is then pivoting to Rishi Sunak, the person who wants to try and improve the polls. But we don't know. Like, ultimately, we don't know. And then the other thing we don't know is, so let's say this is just Rishi Sunak, the man who wants to make himself personally very wealthy, and he doesn't care about the election. He doesn't care how badly it's lost. He doesn't care if any Tory MPs win their seats at the end of it. He just cares about the money. Then you think, so what about the rest of his party? So if he's willing to go as long as it takes to get his trade deal, or run to the end of the road if it never happens, what do the rest of his party do? Because what needs to happen in order to stop it, all they can do is threaten his leadership. But to do that, you not only need over half of all Tory MPs to say we need to change you, they sort of need to agree that there's someone to change him for. Remember, with Boris Johnson, it took an extra 6 months at least to actually tell him to go, because what was happening is you had a load of Tory MPs saying to other Tory MPs, we need to get rid of him, we need to get rid of him. And then they would fire back, with who? Sunak, do me a favour. Liz Truss, she's crazy. Like, who do you replace him with? And it just got to the point that sort of June 2022, when the answer to who do you replace him with was anybody. The pissing dustbin man. We don't care. Get rid of him. So the same thing will sort of presumably happen with Sunak. Like, he was already their plan C. Like, who have they got left? The best argument for getting rid of Sunak when you haven't got anyone obvious is that whoever replaces them, even if they're worse, and they'll almost certainly be worse, they'll start off with a bit more credibility, and it will. So as long as you pick someone who will burn through that credibility more slowly than Liz Truss did, like Kemi Badenoch or Suella Braverman could burn through it really very quickly. Penny Mordaunt, maybe they see her as she won't be any good, but she won't burn through that credibility as quickly.
Yeah.
So, but but that's the thing. Maybe Sunak just thinks the party is still too divided to actually replace him so that he can do what he likes, in which case, whatever. All bets are off. Well, my bet's still on, but
we've got a super chat. Thank you, John Hart, £2 super chat. If Sunak calls a spring general election, I will be ecstatic. It's a pun. And also, Darren Daily Blase is here. Hi, Darren. Has anyone seen the protest near Downing Street where everyone is dressed as chickens and wearing Rishi Sunak masks and carrying signs saying "Name the date Sunak"?
This is the thing. This is the thing I tried to say about Labour when Labour were pushing. Oh, it's all about May. They're clearly given for May 2nd, which sort of true. All the evidence was there. It was. I said at the time, it's so that if Sunak doesn't call it for then, they'll instantly call out saying the unelected Prime Minister squatting in number 10 is afraid of voters. He's afraid of the ballot box. This was obviously planned well in advance. This wasn't reactive. They already had the suits ready. So this wasn't reactive. They've been planning this for ages. So Labour weren't totally confident it was a May election. They were just confident that either it would be a May 2nd election or they were going to pillory the crap out of him. Just to make it worse.
There was an official Labour video that went out today of Rishi Sunak going out to the podium to speak in Downing Street. And then when he opened his mouth, the only noise that came out was...
Yeah, that was yesterday. That was the instant he made the announcement. Again, it was already ready to go. They already had it planned out. Yeah, it was so obvious that this is what Labour were going to be doing. It is because they've already been labelling him as an unelected Prime Minister. Given that, I mean, in my lifetime, there's been something like 11 general elections. All but one of them has taken place in spring. All but one of them, and that was the last one.
And that was awful. So it was a shit show. It was good for the Tories, though.
Yeah, but it also wasn't a normal general election.
It was not normal.
It didn't take place on the normal issues.
Super chat. Thank you very much to Brad W. for the super chat. I had £40 on April to June election at 4-1 when Sunak said that I added £20 at 7-1. Never believe anything until it's been officially denied.
See, I actually managed to have odds of 7-1 before he'd even said that on my bet. But yeah, I mean, all he's ruled out is May the 2nd. Theresa May herself ruled out a snap election in 2017. Then a few weeks later, oh no, there's not going to be a snap election. Don't be silly. And then a few weeks later, oh, I think we'll have a snap election.
I was in Panama at the time. I had to come home from Panama because I had pledged to stand in my constituency in Liverpool, West Derby, Liverpool, if Stephen Twigg voted with the Tories to activate Article 50. We've got 4 members of Parliament in Liverpool, and 3 of them voted against the Tories or abstained. He was the only one who voted with the Tories, which I was not happy about. And then Theresa May called an election. Because I said, I'm going to stand against you in the next election after this, Stephen. And I thought he wasn't going to... There wouldn't be an election until 2020.
I mean, she should have had... I mean, people will say, obviously, this is hindsight. She should have actually just held it in May, at the same time as the local elections. She'd have smashed it. But anyway.
It was in May, wasn't it?
No.
It was June, wasn't it? It was beginning of June.
Yeah, they had the... What happened was they did really well in the local elections, and then they went, we're really riding high in the polls. We could get a bigger majority and ignore those ERG loans.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do that. And then because she was... I mean, I play a lot on the fact that she was just shit scared of the public and she was really bad. But in actual fact, obviously the team around her were bad as well. Yeah. I mean, James Johnson was one of them. He's explaining just how inept he is at the moment. Going on about immigration being really important. It's like, it's the subject that's killing the Tories, you idiot. They shouldn't be talking about it at all. It's like, oh, no, look at this. And he showed the YouGov thing, which I've used myself, which shows that most although it's not a top issue for most voters, it is a top issue for most Conservative voters. Yeah, but who made it that? It's because the Tories have spent 2 years on their pissing Rwanda plan, amplifying the need, like making out that immigration is this massive issue, this huge crisis in the country, and then pursuing a policy that cannot possibly do anything but make it worse. So, you know, I've already recorded a video that will be either later today or tomorrow on my own channel, where what the Tories did is they created failure criteria for their government and then delivered it.
Yeah.
You know, they said things like, oh, we're against high taxes, record high taxes. Oh, we're against public spending, really high public spending. We're against immigration, record high immigration. You know, everything they say they're against, they've actually delivered.
The new definition of extremism that Michael Gove came out with yesterday describes precisely the Tory party. Well, they can't get away from it. That's what, undermining freedoms and rights and the democratic process. That's literally what you do. But it's like always accuse your enemies of that which you yourself are guilty. Fascism 101.
I think it's simpler than that. I think Michael Gove was high as a kite and thought it'd be a good laugh.
I got another super chat. Sam, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. In terms of right-wing voting, how big of an impact would significant media reform have compared with PR? Where would you put them in Labour priorities?
PR first. The thing as well with PR is media reform will naturally follow anyway.
Yeah.
You know, the media lose their power because they can only appeal to so many voters. So as soon as you give more electoral power to a wider spread of voters, you automatically neuter a little bit the power of the media anyway. And then it's easier to work on electoral reform, media reform. So if you have electoral reform first, you already weaken the grip of the media because they can only appeal to certain types of voter. Those types of voter at the moment are really important. They are the people who ultimately did swing elections. If you change that, then all of a sudden the media are more vulnerable. So electoral reform has to come first. It is the thing that leads to everything else, or not. I'm not saying we're going to become some sort of utopia at the end of it, but you know, it does make it easier to bring in lots of other progressive reforms.
Thank you very much to Flameproof there for the £10 super chat. That's really kind. General election before the end of June wins me 250 quid at 4-1. July to September general election would win me 420 quid at 20-1.
I mean, the thing is, it will be 20-1 there because July to September includes, well, July and August, which they're not going to have a general election in late July or August because people go on holiday. The reason I booked my wedding for August and in specifically the August bank holiday week, 0 chance of an election then because all the Tory voters and activists and MPs will be on holiday. Because
I love that you're arranging your wedding around the political calendar.
Well, of course, I can't afford to be getting married when he calls a pissing election, or when the election.
Could you imagine? You're there at the altar and your phone buzzes, and you're like, "Oh shit, I've got to go and make a video."
Well, that's exactly why I see how strategy is.
See, you've got someone filming the wedding. You could say, "Here, gives your camera." Plug into the internet. Super chat. Thank you very much to Captain Bart Roberts, £5. The number of Tories retiring at the next GE. There was another one today.
Yeah, I'm sure. In the last 24 hours.
I'm sure they don't become. It's so they don't become the next Portillo moment of the next general election. Well, yeah. So many of the big names are going to go in this election. The way things are looking at the moment. Richard Marsden saying congratulations, Phil and partner. So what are you going to say? There's been 2 defections in the last... Sorry, defections.
Yeah, there was Brandon Lewis yesterday. Then there was this junior minister today. I've forgotten his name. Some nobody. It was a defence minister. He says...
they're not going to stand in the next election.
I mean, he's actually... It's not just that he's not standing in the next election. He's actually leaving government. He says for family reasons. Family reasons usually means we're on the way out and I want to start the time until I can take up another job. Because... when you leave government, you have a certain period of like gardening leave before you can take up like a lobbying position.
Or something?
Well, it can something like that. I think it can vary depending on your role. But either way, there is that period. And given that the election can take place at any point. So when he says it's also muttered about defence spending, but defence spending has been cut for years.
Yeah.
So he hasn't felt the need to resign until the election's been imminent. So, you can take that with a pinch of salt. But Brandon Lewis, quite bizarre. I saw David Allen Green today saying, actually, if you think about it, it was probably the best Justice Secretary we've had, which is technically true because he was Justice Secretary for a few weeks and he dealt with the strikes, the barrister strikes. He dealt with all that, said, oh, you want more money? Here's some more money. It's just that as Northern Ireland Secretary, he stood in front of Parliament saying, yeah, we're going to break the law. And as Health Secretary, basically hid away. Oh, his nurses on strike. They shouldn't be on strike. Oh, would you like to talk to us about it? No, I'm not going to talk to you about it.
No, I'm not going to have discussions.
So that's
what
his
discussions? When discussions
career.
ever got us, Phil?
Exactly.
Negotiations. What do you think I am? Some kind of politician? A couple of super chats come in. Robalaris, thank you very much for the £20 super chat. Really appreciate that. It's really kind. And Johnny Copperhead, £5 super chat. Thank you. Is the Sunak a mythical beast? Part man, part chicken, all vulture.
Very, very probably, yes.
A vulture capitalist.
Yes.
As they call people who run hedge funds and things.
I mean, yeah, he's whatever he's thinking in terms of the election, in terms of his own thinking, will be purely in terms of how he makes himself as much money as possible. But he doesn't, he's not an absolute monarch in the party or anything. There are influential people. I mean, I still keep going over in my head that meeting with Graham Brady, which Brady called for, not Sunak.
Yeah.
So it wasn't Sunak saying, can I have, because normally the prime minister or the leader of the party, don't have to be prime minister, but the leader of the party gets their information about the mood of backbenchers from their whips. That's the job of the whips. It's not just to tell MPs which way to vote. It's to sort of gauge the general mood. So if that's broken down, if there's like a breakdown of trust between the whips, you can understand Sunak maybe scheduling a meeting with Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee. But that didn't what happened. Well, according to reports, Brady called the meeting with Sunak. And it can only be bad news. Brady is basically the Tories' Grim Reaper. He is the one who says to the leader, you're about to be absolutely screwed over here. You might want to think about resigning. That is basically the only reason he can have. I mean, he certainly didn't schedule a private secret meeting with Rishi Sunak to say, oh, by the way, you're totally secure. You can do what you like for the next year.
Sorted.
That was absolutely not what happened. So I just keep thinking, surely Sunak cannot think that he is safe. I mean, he might be safe. It could be that he doesn't ever call an election. We have the election in January 2025, and Sunak is still the prime minister that leads us into it. That's entirely possible. I'm quite prepared to believe that the Tory party is too split to do anything about it. But how can he be so sure? I don't think he can be that confident.
Yeah.
So I still think, we could easily be on for a spring election.
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch this. Happen. The bastard will probably have it at the end of June, 1 week after it's outside the period where I can win my bet. I can see that.
Yeah, he's probably watching this video now thinking, how can I best screw over Phil?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the Rwanda plan sort of being part of it. And somehow it's like mid-May when he sort of gets all his ducks in a line. And then he goes, right, I can call the election now. The election's called for the end of June. I'm thinking, you bastard. Just cost £700.
Emma, thank you for the super chat. He's not calling it as he doesn't have enough candidates to fill the vacancies. That's a good point, actually. Who would want to stand as a Tory MP knowing that you're going to lose as a paper candidate?
There's always someone who wants to have a pop at it. They have like Labour stand people pretty much everywhere. Conservatives do as well. There's always someone.
Yeah, but I mean,
if you're going to go around knocking on the doors, you might as well introduce yourself as the candidate as well. Why not? Who doesn't enjoy staying up till 3 a.m. in a sports hall to be told that they've lost? Piss off.
All the fun of the fair. So should we move on to talk about this guy, Hank Fester, who has said horrific things, but he's not a racist, apparently. Now, what I want to talk about in particular is the way that this narrative has been shaped by certain elements on the left and also the tabloid press of it's somehow now all Keir Starmer's fault. It's like, okay. So just to be clear, like Diane Abbott had to leave the Labour Party, well, she's not
She
left
had the
the
whip
party.
removed.
She had the whip removed. She's still part of the party. She's not an MP for Labour anymore. She's independent. And that was because of an article that she wrote in which she claimed that Jews and travellers couldn't experience racism. Which obviously, the Labour Party being super sensitive, especially when it comes to accusations of anti-Semitism, they jumped on it and said, right, we're going to suspend you from the party.
She basically said, if you're white, you can't be a victim of racism.
Yeah.
That's what, despite the fact that not all Jews are white, but that didn't matter. Again, I mean, that's, in her head as well. She also had a pop at you. She also made it out it's actually by saying, oh, it's only really like picking on ginger people. Oh, so it's all right to pick on ginger people then, is it? So she basically said it's fine to pick on Jews, ginger people, and the Romani community, was it as well?
Yeah, travellers. Yeah. So, but the thing is, she did apologise for it. There's an investigation that's still apparently ongoing, and maybe that investigation should have been done months ago. This was over a year ago that this incident happened, and now there's talk of bringing Diane Abbott back into the party.
No, I think you're behind there. There's not. It's there was talk. That talk did not come from Labour. The actual from Labour. Yeah, but the actual talk is basically what Diane Abbott did this week, right? When that Frank Hester thing did, you know how it's a similar thing with Gaza. It's like all the people going, "Oh, this is terrible. What Netanyahu's doing is terrible. This is all Starmer's fault." Not even Sunak and Starmer's fault. Not even like the mainstream political media. It's all Starmer's fault. Everything's Starmer's fault. Yeah. Oh, we're campaigning. Right. It's the same thing here. So Diane Abbott, as soon as that Frank Hester thing came out, right, later on, she wrote an article or contributed to an article, I'm not sure which it was, in which she attacks Labour for it. And this is what you come back to. And she was saying Labour weren't quick enough to condemn it. It's like within 2 hours of the story breaking, a senior member of the Labour front bench was literally in Parliament making a statement in front of MPs condemning it.
Yes.
So she lied.
However, Phil, they did send out a email that I got, and you probably got as well, to all Labour members saying, this is disgraceful. The Tories have got 10 million, now 15 million pounds off this horrible racist, and we need some money to compete against this because they're not going to give it back, are they? And that was seen as using Diane Abbott as a way of fundraising, this horrible thing that's happened to Diane Abbott as a way of fundraising. So whether they mention it or they don't mention it, they get it in the neck. And this is so typical of the situation with Labour at the moment. Even that there's two paths they can go down, and both of them lead to, they're both a trap. Like they just can't win.
Well, they can, because ultimately the people who are having a moan are not politically important, and that's their fault for making themselves politically irrelevant.
What do you think is going to come of this?
Nothing. Diane Abbott, she, first of all, she is racist. You can't claim to be an anti-racist if you are self-racist. Like if you're anti-racist, like you can't just say, oh no, I'm standing up for these people's rights, not these ones. I mean, I'll go back to someone, and I can't remember who it was, but it was someone who'd worked closely with Corbyn. Now, just because they say this doesn't mean it's true, but it made sense, because it's the same thing with Jeremy Corbyn. You know, he says his supporters say he's an anti-racism campaigner, but he's not, because when was the last time he attended a march or made a speech for a rally attacking anti-Semitism? He's not. It doesn't do that. So he picks and chooses. And what this person who'd worked with Corbyn said is he's not really an anti-racism campaigner. He's an anti-poverty campaigner. So in his mind, he sees people who, and the same thing I think is true of Diane Abbott, or potentially true, should we say. So they see people from certain backgrounds. They'll see people who are sort of descended from people from, say, Africa or the West Indies, disproportionately in poverty. So they call out the racism there inherent in the system, so to speak. People from potentially some Arab backgrounds as well. People from Pakistani and Bangladeshi backgrounds, but not Indian backgrounds, because they see those as affluent. And they don't attack anti-Semitism because not only are there doesn't mean to say they're anti-Semites, but there are anti-Semites around them.
Yeah.
But also they see Jewish people as essentially affluent, which is, again, a sort of stereotypical anti-Semitic view of a Jewish person, because there's plenty of poor Jewish people. But that then makes more sense. They're not anti-racism campaigners. People will say that. You can't be an anti-racism campaigner if you then engage in racism. It's simply not possible.
That's one of the arguments that was used for the former leader, when people would say, "Oh, he can't be possibly anti-Semitic because he campaigned against racism in the apartheid in the 1980s." And I'm like, Mel Gibson campaigned against apartheid. He made Lethal Weapon 2, which is a very anti-apartheid film with Danny Glover, who's black. However, a few years later, he got drunk, beat his wife, drove his car, and when he's pulled over by the police, he claimed that all wars in the world were started by Jews. Yeah. Like, you can be two things at once. It's not impossible. In the same way that a lot of people hold contradictory thoughts in their head at the same time. I am minded to agree with Malal here, who says, is it just shameful? Is it me, or is it just shameful that they didn't allow Abbott to speak at PMQs? I don't think you're alone in that. I think that Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House, should have let her speak. They finished 8 minutes earlier than they did the week before. There was literally no reason. They finished on a question from Mark Francois, and they started on a Tory question. So and who would complain? Like, who would complain about that?
I can buy the argument that he was a bit bitten by sort of changing a convention. No, he didn't change a convention, but he went against a convention a few weeks before with the SNP debacle. Yeah. But at the same time, again, what you're just saying is his judgment's poor. Because you're right. No one actually would have complained if Diane Abbott got us a question. No, Conservatives wouldn't have complained. SNP wouldn't have complained. Labour wouldn't have complained. No one would have complained.
Yeah.
And she may not have said anything useful. She may not. But again, given that it ended up being a debate about her, you would have thought she would have been at least allowed to say something.
Look, I know you might not agree with this, but I think that if I was leading the Labour Party at the moment, I'd be having a chat with Diane Abbott about what we can do to restore the whip to Diane. She's asked for it specifically. I think it will go a long way to show the blue sea between the Tories and the Conservatives, address those sort of accusations of they're all the same. And it would show Labour as being a broad church to some degree.
That conversation has already taken place. She basically spat in their face. What seems to be the buzz now is again, if this report is true, what they're trying to do is say, look, at the moment, they can't restore the whip at the moment, apart from the fact she decided to vent her ire at Labour, and by telling a lie as well, saying that Labour didn't actually condemn it. They were slow to condemn it when they condemned it in Parliament, for the record, as soon as the story broke. But but also, how bad would it look to be attacking the Tories over racism, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to readmit this racist to our ranks again? So the timing would be terrible. But also, the deal apparently, or what Labour want, obviously Diane Abbott's not going to go for it, is to say, look, we can get round to restoring the whip, but you just don't stand at the next election.
Yeah.
So there are negotiations going on there. I don't see what's in it for her if they do that at all. But at the end of PMQs, Keir Starmer went straight up to Diane Abbott to talk to her.
Yeah, but wasn't that the conversation where he said, what do you want? She said, I'd like the whip restored.
I don't think he would have done that around other MPs. He obviously went to talk to her. I don't know what was said. But if something like that, you don't have as a conversation when surrounded by other people, particularly people who don't have your interests at heart as well.
I don't know. I feel like for the optics, if it was me, I'd be sitting down having a conversation with Diane Abbott.
They are, but they won't come to an accord, because at the end of the day, Diane Abbott sees it as her mission to hamper Labour. Like, and I've said this, and I've said this under Corbyn, I'll say it under anyone. A Labour MP's job is to make it more likely that the Labour win the next election. That is their job. If they cannot do that,
that will
stand
be
as an
part of that
independent.
conversation, Phil.
Yeah, but she won't. She fundamentally, she couldn't even do it this week. Even at the point at which she basically this week said, "Give me back the whip, you fuckers." That was literally what she said this week.
Yeah.
No,
but I mean, at least have a conversation.
They are having a conversation.
She's seen as an inspiration to millions of people in this country. She's the first black female MP.
Yeah, but she's also a racist.
I agree. No, I agree she messed up. But if she's apologised for that, if she said, "Look, I got it wrong. I shouldn't have said that," which she's already done.
Yeah, she did do. She did it as soon as she was criticised. But she spent a full week thinking about that really
That's better
short
than Hester.
statement.
Hester bloody hasn't even apologised for the racism. He said, sorry for being a bit rude.
I don't think the person who bankrolls the Tory party is the moral bar, though. And again, my attitude is always and will always be, if you want to shoot your mouth off about whatever, do it as an independent. You don't do it as a Labour MP.
At least have that conversation. At least sit down.
They're having the conversation, though. They're doing that. They've been doing it for some time.
Okay.
It's been happening.
I think
it's not going to find an accord because Diane Abbott wants to destroy the Labour Party unless there's someone in charge of it she approves of. She's no different to Jeremy Corbyn or any of the others. They are not Labour. They are people who use Labour because there's only two ways with their sort of politics. There's only two ways to get a platform. You either become a Labour MP or you become a senior member of a union, preferably a militant union. That's it. Those are your two routes to having any sort of platform.
Yeah.
But they don't agree with Labour. They're not Labour. They don't share any Labour values.
I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but first, Sam's super chat has got off the screen. Sorry, Sam. Going back to the election. Tuesday, the 25th of June, England's last group stage match of the Euros in Germany. Would that be a good GE option? With Sunak hoping younger, more interest in that. I don't know. I don't think he's going to go for a late June election.
Well, I mean, he might do, but some Tory MPs have expressed out of sheer desperation, if England do well in the Euros, that might do well for it. It's like, have you ever seen a football tournament where England have taken part in the last few years? Let me explain how it goes. So what happens is England have a match. Before the match, they take the knee. Cue about 50 Tory MPs all slagging the England team off. Why on earth would, if voters in England get behind the England team because they're successful in the Euros, which maybe they will be, maybe they won't be, but they weren't the last ones. Why on earth would they go, let's vote for the people who are slagging off our team?
Yeah.
How does that make sense in their heads?
Yeah, indeed. But anyway, going back to the Diane Abbott discussion, mildly displeased is saying, well, I feel as well, if Abbott had the whip restored, she would absolutely be helping Labour win. Many people in the black community are disappointed with Labour's treatment of her. I'm not a fan, but she should be let in. I mean, just for political reasons.
I think no, it's opposite. It's the opposite. Like, first of all, I mean, there's three stages to this. First of all, who are these black people? Right, you can't just find me one or two. Right, where's the evidence that these communities are all up in arms? Right, they're not.
Well, no, there's not everyone. Most people don't give a crap about politics.
Second thing is, like, if we again segue it with another line that people keep coming up, Labour have basically lost the Muslim vote over Gaza. Like, well, no, they haven't. So, if we look, for example, at the actual polling evidence, so that huge MRP poll where the fieldwork was conducted over December. So that was pretty close after the attacks. That was like a month or two after the attacks, depending on exactly when the fieldwork was taking place. And it was when Labour's position was still on the let's wait and see type of thing. Whereas now it is much more in line, you would think, with what many of those, those pro-Palestinian supporters would want anyway. And back then, the MRP poll showed in constituencies with significant Muslim populations that Labour was still smashing it out the park. And they would have been asking those same sort of people because they
Yeah.
cover, that's the whole point of an MRP poll. It covers lots of different types of demographic. People overemphasize the size of these communities. So even if you believe that a significant chunk are against a particular thing, you're forgetting that the vast majority of people in this country are completely different types of communities. So what would 100% happen if Diane Abbott had the whip restored? 100%. First of all, she would carry on her attacks on Labour. How's that helping them win votes? Due to how disgraceful Labour are, because that's what she's been doing for years.
Then that's an excuse to take the whip away. You say to her, "We will restore the whip."
No, but she won't do it.
These are the
She's
rules.
I'm sorry for
can't be
people who are
undermining the
fans of her.
party.
No, I'm sorry for people who are fans of her. She's a liar. She's a liar. She's a very unpleasant piece of work. Yes, she has received the most abuse that any MP has received probably ever. She's that combination of a black person, a woman, and the first black woman MP. The abuse she's faced and continues to face is utterly disgusting. But the thing about abuse victims is some of them go on and they go, "This is horrible. I don't want anyone to feel like this." And they try and support others who are victims, and they try and help. And some of them become the next generation of abuser, and that's what she is. And the other thing is, what you're forgetting is, as soon as they restore the whip, if they restore the whip, instantly it'll be all over the mainstream media. Oh, Labour double standards over racism. It's all right to let their own racists back in. That is 100% what will happen. And you think about how many more voters are likely to have seen her anti-Semitism and, frankly, attacks on ginger people, and
not bothered about attacks on. No one's bothered about that.
Right.
You know, the real issue here is how this plays out with, you know, everyone wants to have a pop at Labour. You've seen it this week where this thing kicked off. This racist gave the Tories £15 million, and they were like, "Oh, we can't call him a racist," even though literally what he did was racist. Oh no, but he's not a racist. And I said this in the show this morning. Like, it's if you commit a murder, you say, "Well, I committed a murder, but I'm not a murderer." It's like, yes, you are, by dint of the fact that you committed a murder. And so, with what's the level of racism and disrespect that Hester showed is off the charts, and also, you know, saying that Diane Abbott should be shot. I mean, that's just not racism. That's you know, proper fomenting violence.
Well, I am actually. I'll kick back slightly on that one. It was an absolutely awful comment when you read the whole comment, because when you just report it as he said she should be shot, it sounds, oh, you know, people, you know, when you actually read the actual words, they are pretty abhorrent, because he really.
But compared with the article that Diane Abbott wrote,
no,
which could be argued it was clumsily written. What she was really meaning was, you can't tell if someone is Irish or Jewish or a traveller by looking at them, but obviously you can see someone is black by looking at them, and there's a difference there.
No.
If she can,
that's not what she was saying.
If she can be contrite about that, if she can apologise, which I think she's already done. Right. But someone said in the chat that it's not up to the Labour leadership because the independent investigation's got to be completed.
There is an investigation, but either way, it's utterly irrelevant. The point, going back to the first thing, like what Hester said about shooting her is for example, did you attack? They got into trouble for this, Purkis and Forte, for the Call the Tories t-shirt.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. Marina Purkis and
Gemma Forte.
And Gemma Forte, they got done because they had a call the Tories.
But who were the ones complaining about it?
The Tories.
The Tories. It wasn't really for other people, because people just thought it was a bit of a joke. What Hester said wasn't even in public. So although what he said about the shooting thing, because of the way he said it was pretty bad, he wasn't inciting people to do it because it was intended as a private conversation. Whereas what Diane Abbott said was specifically intended to persuade people in the public of a view. And that view is, actually, we shouldn't be taking anti-Semitism seriously because at the end of the day, they're white. That's what she actually said in her article.
So from your point of view, more trouble than she's worth.
Well, that's it. There's two separate things there. she is more trouble than she's worth because she will 100% attack Labour with the whip restored. It doesn't matter what she says she will do, she will attack Labour. And then what do they do? Remove the whip for being critical? That makes it 10 times worse, because then Labour get all the stick for inviting the racist back, and then what? Remove the whip because she criticised them? No, that would look ridiculous. But that's a totally separate issue to whether I think her... Like, I would have had the whip removed from her just for that, the fact that she's constantly attacking her own party. I will say that of anyone. Like, one of the reasons why I am not a big fan of Wes Streeting is because in 2019, after the election, he used his victory speech to basically attack the Labour leader. And I thought, hang on a minute, is your, you know, you have to back them. Even you can let the rest of us criticize them, but Labour MPs must back the leader.
Okay,
they can
but that's a good reason for taking the whip off someone in Labour, to say you're not loyal enough to
you
Labour.
Can't
that's
do
the whole
that.
point of having whips, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
super chat.
So that's what I would say. I would say there are some people who are currently in the ascendancy in Labour who I disapprove of as well, because they have in the past undermined Labour. And it doesn't matter that you might think, yes, but they were right, Jeremy Corbyn wasn't suitable. It doesn't matter. You're a Labour MP. There's a responsibility that comes with that.
I don't have a problem with that, Phil. But I'm agreeing. So Johnny Copperhead's got one solution here. Can't we show Diane full moral support without restoring the whip?
And they have done that.
So thank you very much for the super chat there, Johnny.
Not only have Labour explicitly attacked everything Hester said and the way the Tories have reacted to it, they have specifically also explained that Diane Abbott has been the victim of terrible abuses over the years. Yeah. You know, they've had no problem with that. They've had no problem with, on the one hand, saying Diane Abbott has been, you know, grievously impacted by racial and misogynistic abuse as well, because it's the fact that she's a black woman and the first black female MP that has made her this massive focus, because there are plenty of other black MPs who speak out against racism. There are even black female MPs that speak out against it, but she has been this first, so she is their target, right?
Yeah, you
can say that, but at the same time, but she also abuses others. You know, it is possible to be a victim as well as an abuser, and you know, it's.
Haley, thank you very much for the super chat. I agree, it's not good optically to give the whip back right now, but I believe there should be a path back before the next election on a probation.
How do you do that?
Possibly.
How's that even? And again, how do you even do it?
Sorry, Madly Displeased makes the point. Corbyn refused to apologise for his terrible handling of anti-Semitism. He should never be allowed to touch Labour again. Diane Abbott has apologised, and I don't think her whole career should be ended.
Well, her whole career has already run its course. She's had a very long career. She's had a very long career. She's not, you know, we're not talking about if Nadia Whittome had just said something stupid like that. You know, you're talking about someone who's had their career. What's she going to do in politics? What is she actually doing? What does, you know, if someone who likes to support her say, what is she going to do as an MP that's of any use to anyone?
Well, hasn't she been a good MP for her constituency?
Oh, yeah, she's a good constituency MP, but how do you know that any replacement wouldn't be as well?
Well, I know, but I mean,
like she, you know, like she can still work in the community if she wants to, or she can go off and join some national or international group. She's got a large enough profile to do that. You know, thanks to the party that she has spent her time trying to make unelectable, she's actually done really well for herself.
Okay,
and
Phil, I think we have a winner. Don Dodat in the chat. Send her to the House of Lords. She's more accomplished than most and will be a good compromise for both sides.
If she wants to do that, she might have a problem with that.
Well, she doesn't have to go. She doesn't have to turn up.
Well, I know, but I mean, if you're talking about as a possible, tell you what, after some discrete period of you keeping your mouth shut, we'll restore the whip. You don't stand, and we'll put you in the House of Lords. Yeah. That only, you know, you could sort of see that. You know, she'll still have her platform then.
Yeah. She might actually be allowed to speak.
Oh, she'll certainly be allowed to speak.
Oh, good. That'd be nice.
But
especially when the conversation's
about
that? Her.
Would she want that?
I don't know.
There are some.
I don't know.
like, So yeah, it may be that she wouldn't actually want a seat in the House of Lords.
Yeah. Katrina Price saying House of Lords is going to be abolished, though. Yeah, but it's not going to be completely that we're not going to have an upper chamber. We'll still have an upper chamber. It's just the way that is put together is going to be different. But putting in the House of Lords, I think, is a good compromise. To see what she says. Right. So what else has happened this week? We're not having an election. Tories taking money off racists. A bit of a what do you think about the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle? Do you think he should basically go, or do you think he should just stay in his place? How many years he's got left? Is it 2 parliaments? Is it that he stays?
I don't know. I mean, what I would say about, I've said it before, I don't think he's corrupt at all. He's not a Tory shill. That's ridiculous.
Oh no, I don't.
He's just useless.
I think he's just useless. Yeah, I agree with you.
I think, you know, he knows his stuff to the point where if MPs would just largely behave themselves and all he had to do was what the Speaker's supposed to do, which is direct people to speak and make sure that, you know, the proper procedures are followed, he'd be fine. He'd be absolutely fine. He's an usher. That's fine. The problem is that Parliament is so broken and the behaviour is so awful, and no one or very few have got respect for Parliament. There's a large number of MPs actively trying to destroy it from the inside, and he's not robust enough for those times. His judgment is too poor. He's a bit, he's sharing the same spine with Sunak, and I'm not actually sure that they've both lost it at the moment. So yeah, it's just not. He's not the right speaker for our times. But then, arguably, no one would be. Betty Boothroyd's dead, so we can't call her back. She might have been good. She took no nonsense. I actually sometimes think that maybe being an in-your-face woman helped her, because a lot of MP, and it was worse then. It's actually not as bad now. Back then, it was all basically middle-aged to elderly, white, privately educated men.
Yeah.
So it was almost like she was matron or nanny, so she could shut them up. Yeah. An authoritative female figure sometimes is quite good for people from that background. So maybe if we had someone like that. But I look at the current deputy leaders, because I do watch those in debates at times, and I'm just not. I mean, Winterton's resigning anyway, standing down at the next election anyway.
Which one's Winterton?
So she's the Labour one, the Labour deputy.
Well, who's the
Dame
Tory
Rosie
deputy?
Winterton. So there's two. I've forgotten their names actually.
The one who did the budget. She's Tory.
Yeah,
Tory deputy.
She is. I mean, the other two are Tory MPs by definition.
Yeah.
I mean, possibly better. I'm still not sure she's. I think you need a real bruiser of a speaker at the moment. But I mean, Hoyle he's not up to it. It may be different in the next Parliament where there's hardly any Tory MPs left. Who knows? He may then be fine. But at the same time, in the here and now, well, that would be hilarious. And if they do keep delaying the election, they do genuinely increase the chance of the Lib Dems being the official opposition.
Every day that they
I mean, if you look at it, think about there's so many things to think about as disadvantages for delaying it into autumn. Doesn't mean to say that it is autumn. It could still be like May the 9th or something.
Yeah.
But if they do delay it into autumn, I mean, apart from anything else, it gives Labour even more time to prepare. I mean, you think about the rebuilding exercise they've had to do. It's been huge. So it gives them more time to prepare. It gives the Lib Dems more time it gives Ed Davey more time to move on from the post office scandal, which I think was unfairly dumped on him. It gives Reform UK more time. It gives tactical voting groups and other non-partisan anti-Tory groups more time to get their ducks in a line and get sorted and build up their support. At the moment, all of the forces ranged against the Tories benefit from more time to prepare, and the Tories do not benefit from more time.
Jeannie Bottle in the chat has made a good point about Diane Abbott's ascension to the House of Lords. Diane would say yes to piss off Nadine. I'd love to see that.
Yes,
I'd love to see
quite good.
The look on Nadine's face. It will be a picture. An ugly picture, but a picture nonetheless. Thank you very much, One Angry Pagan, for the £5 super chat. Can someone please name me the right-wing policies coming from Labour? People talk about Labour behaving like the Tories. I'd like some actual evidence. This probably isn't the best channel to look for that, because we're not sitting here attacking the Tories every verse end like our colleagues over at
Richard's just asked a procedural question there. Could an MP from the SNP be elected a speaker like Alison Thelis? So in theory, they can elect who they want. However, the procedure is that you have, although this could change after the election, but the procedure is that you have amongst the speaker and the 3 deputies, so there's 4 altogether. And remember, they don't vote. The speaker has a casting vote if it's a dead tie, right? But generally speaking, they don't vote. So that's 4 MPs that sacrifice their right to vote. So you can sort of see the reason why it's 2 Labour and 2 Conservative, because the idea is they are the big superpowers in Parliament, and it stops one, like, because otherwise the party, like, you wouldn't want Labour contributing 2 MPs that can't vote to the Tories just 1, because in a tight election that could make the difference. So it's like you're hitting each other's voting power by the same amount. Yeah. So yes, in theory you could, and if the Tories were beaten down to 5 MPs, possibly they would. Maybe it would be 2 Labour, 1 Lib Dem, 1 SNP, which would be funny as hell. But at the moment, given that Labour and the Tories are the 2 large voting blocs, that is the reason why you have this convention of 2 Labour, 2 Tories for Speaker and Deputy Speakers. It's so that you reduce their voting power equally.
Yeah. One Angry Pagan saying he was being flippant. Yeah, I know. But that whole thing of the Tories are all the same, it really winds me up, because it's exactly the line that Tory HQ want out there. They're all the same. And it's why they tried to equate Boris Johnson having 17 freaking cocaine-fueled baccalaureate orgies at his mansion in London, while the rest of us couldn't go to our grandmother's funerals. They want to make that the same as Keir Starmer having a beer when he was eating a curry when he was in a private meeting, working towards the Hartlepool by-election, because it's exactly the same. A picture taken by a Tory's son who just happened to be on this private quad outside the building where it was taken. Funny that. But yeah, it's all the same. And that sort of false equivalence, it works. It honestly works. It works with tobacco. It worked with climate change. Obviously, it's worked with a lot of people who are on the left and yet still fall for it. They go, yeah, they are all the same. You think about it, not very hard. If you think about it, not very hard. They're all the same. But what's the best comeback for that when people say they're all the same for you?
I would just ask them to name a Labour policy that's also shared by the Tories.
Yeah,
because the only ones they could think of is in terms of foreign policy. They it's traditional for oppositions not to attack that too much, particularly if it's sensitive. So obviously Labour will back the Tories on our attitude towards Ukraine, particularly as they are actually supporting Ukraine, and the same thing really with the Middle East. So those are the only ones. Whereas if you talk about domestic policy, name a domestic policy Labour have that's shared by the Tories. There aren't any.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue the Tories have nicked a few of Labour's, but not quite the same. Like, taxing windfall taxes on oil companies and the delaying the non-dom status. Not quite the same thing, but similar. But you can't. People won't actually be able to name one that's the same because there aren't any. The Tories actually have very few policies, but none of them are in common.
F. Tumstuk in the chat is saying, we should stop asserting that those parties at number 10 were cocaine fueled. Well, look, I'm just going off what I saw on the Channel 4 quasi-drama documentary, Partygate, which showed cleaners finding little baggies of cocaine the next day.
Absolutely drugs there.
So, okay, sue me.
100%. They were 100% drugs there.
I don't think they'd have a leg to stand on, to be honest with you. And it would draw attention to the fact that so many of these Tories are posh, coked up schoolboys who never leave school, never have to develop emotional intelligence, never have to understand what it's like to, panic about the fact that there's something wrong with the house and you could literally be homeless now because you can't afford to fix it, or the rent, or the mortgage. They'll never know, because the Tories don't just have different rules for them, they have a different reality. Yeah. Different reality, Phil.
Well, that's exactly it. They I again, a video I've just been scripting. I say, we had this news this week that some Tory MPs want to go long because a few of the less experienced ones have run up massive debts and they need a few more months' salary to tide them over. I
saw that one.
And the thing is, what you look at and you think to yourself, so when we say, how did the Tories get themselves into this mess? Why did they just break ever to the point where people would see it? Oh, well, they were just asset stripping the country. They were stealing everything. It's like, yeah, but most Tory MPs didn't benefit from that. So what's actually happened is, so the Tories who did, the likes of Kwasi Kwarteng, he's voluntarily stepping down. He'll have work lined up. Dominic Raab has got a better paid job lined up already. Jeremy Hunt's already a wealthy business as landlord. So if he loses his seat, he's not going to struggle for money. Rishi Sunak was already, rich beyond the dreams of avarice by most people's before he entered Parliament. And he's going to leave in a much healthier position. Jacob Rees-Mogg, same thing. All of the people, Boris Johnson's making more money now than he ever did before. All of these people who actually caused this damage, they're not worrying about the bills if they leave Parliament, or if they voluntarily leave Parliament, or they get kicked out of Parliament. None of them are worrying about paying the bills. But there are Tory MPs, evidently, who are, and they weren't responsible for masterminding any of these policies, but they went along with it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting, because I've just been talking about the importance of party allegiance as an MP. I'm not suggesting they should have been voting against all of these things, but they should have shown a bit more interest in policy formation, and they should have certainly exercised a little bit more caution in appointing leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Perry in the chat asking, why aren't they tested for illicit substances like in other jobs? Well, they were going to try and bring in a rule saying that you couldn't stand as an MP if you were a sex offender. And Christopher Chope, privately educated champion of the nonces everywhere, this is the same guy that stopped the debate on upskirting, on whether to make that a criminal offence. Nice guy. He waded into that one and said, no, we can't have that. This is also Christopher Chope, who stood up in Prime Minister's Questions this week and started whittering on about his anti-vax conspiracy theories. He seems nice.
Yeah. I haven't actually. Is he stepping down as well, or I can't remember?
Bloody hope so. He is an absolute menace. That man.
I lose track now. There's like literally now one in six Tory MPs from the 2019 election is either stepping down or has already buggered off, like Nadine Dorries or Co.
Just to finish off, I mean, look, policies aside, the two things I always mention when I'm talking about Labour and the difference between Labour and the Conservatives. One is access. You and I, just about me and Phil, but also you and I watching this, we have access to Labour like we don't have access to the Tories. If you want to try and influence the Tories in any way, shape or form, you need to have very deep pockets. You need to be rich. You need to have gone to school with them, essentially. Whereas Labour are a lot more open. And I know it's not perfect. Nothing ever is, but they are a lot more open. There's a lot more accessibility for normal plebs like us to be able to talk to them and talk to your local MP and hopefully bring up things, that they might not know about, that they might be able to bring up in Parliament. The other thing is accountability. And this is something that we've mentioned on this channel a load of times. When the Labour landslide, hopefully, happens, this channel isn't going to pack up and go home. Phil's not going to stop making videos. We're going to continue making videos about British politics. And we are going to be critical of Labour where they deserve to be criticised. And we're going to be, making videos about good stuff that they've done when it deserves to say, oh yeah, they actually did some good stuff. But if you think for a moment that when Labour get in, suddenly all the tabloid press, all the billionaires in this country, all the oligarchs, all, the filthy rich are going to just suddenly turn around and go, oh, actually, we're going to stop having a go at Labour now they're in office. I've got a bridge to sell you, because they are going to attack Labour even more once they're in office, because they're going to be held to account for everything that they do. And if they put a foot wrong, it's going to be on the front cover of all of the newspapers. Unlike the Tories, who can continue to do terrible things like have 17 or 18 parties when we were all locked down. And the Daily Mail responds with, "Is that it? Is that all it was?" But yeah, something that should not be forgotten is the fact that they were partying during lockdown. And that's one of the reasons that I think that so many people are going to be not necessarily voting for Labour or Lib Dems or the SNP or Plaid Cymru or the Greens. They're going to be voting against the Tories in this upcoming election. People are going to be voting Reform because of the parties.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they're a Tory. They don't want to vote for the other side.
Well, this is what I don't get. Like, there's so many people I've seen last night when they said about Rishi Sunak ruling out May saying, "Oh, why didn't you do that ages ago then? I mean, it'd be ridiculous going to the polls when you're 20 points behind." It's like, you say that like it's a blip. You say like that like it was sort of okay, and then something happened the last few months and it went to 20 points, and they just need to wait a few months for it to go down. It's been like that for a year and a half. What on earth makes people think it will be better in the autumn? But there is a trend that's changing, and that is Reform UK are gaining in the polls.
Yeah,
they are eating into the Tories' lead. You know, I watch it every few YouGov polls. They've eaten another chunk into it. Yeah. So from the Tories' point of view, yes, in theory, it sounds mad to go to the polls when you're 20 odd points behind. But when you look at the trajectory, yeah, but you'll be even further, not necessarily behind Labour, because remember, the actual poll gap only matters to an extent, because the reason why Labour's support is fairly static but the Tories is going down is because there'll be people in some parts of the country going, well, there's no point in voting for Labour because Labour have no chance. I'll vote for the Lib Dems, or I'll vote for this other party or this other party. They'll vote for whoever is going to challenge the Tories. And so it doesn't matter that the poll lead could stay the same, or we might as well then wait till autumn just in case something happens. The amount of Tory votes leaching to Reform UK is growing. And the Rwanda plan, unless he's got some cunning, here's the situation. Unless Sunak and his strategists have got something cunning lined up with this Rwanda plan, if they let that run too long, that will again allow Reform UK to say, we told you it was a shit plan. It's not worked, has it? Yeah. Oh, the channel crossings are still happening. Yeah, we said it was shit. So that'll just lose them even more votes. So, and here's the thing. Do we believe that the Tory strategists have got some cunning wheeze lined up? A few years ago, I might have believed it, but now I'm thinking everything Sunak and his strategists, his advisors, everything they touch turns to shit. So why would I believe that this most improbable of policies can somehow be made to work in their favor? And this is why I still don't rule out a May election. That he may have ruled out a May the 2nd election. I think it would be a weird lie to tell if he still, because it would look really weird if he goes for May the 2nd. But I wouldn't rule out the following week or a couple of weeks later or June or something.
Yeah. May
I still struggle to see. I still struggle to see. Maybe. Well, maybe. Yeah. Because if they hold the election on May the 3rd, they can distract from all the local election results will come out of May. It'll be like a distraction from that because all the news will be about the general election. That'd be a good plan.
True. Right, super chat from Brian. Thank you very much for that, mate. And my brother's watching. Hi, Mike. How you doing? And also, I've got a comment here. This is going to have to be the last one because we're going to have to round up. One Angry Pagan. Is it possible that people misunderstand the current political game? None of the large parties will have exactly what we want. The point is to get as much as we can until we can achieve PR. One thing I'll add to that, One Angry Pagan, is even when we get PR, we're not going to get exactly what we want because we're going to have smaller parties working together, coming to some kind of compromise in which nobody's 100% happy because that's politics. And treating politics like some kind of stupid, naive wish list to Santa. I want this, and this is what I want for Christmas. And if you don't get that, you stamp your feet and say, right, that's it, I'm leaving. I think it's naivety on a bunch of...
You've got 68 million people. You cannot... I know there are a few drones in the country, but by and large, different people have different opinions about things. So if you think about the hundreds of policies that a political party needs in order to effectively have a plan for government,
Yeah.
You cannot possibly agree with all of them. And even if you agree with the outcomes of the policy, you won't always agree with the particular methods. There'll always be something to disagree with. So it is always, any choice in life is always about the best you can get. Like when you go for a job, it's the same thing. Very few people have their dream job. And yet, and even if you sort of do and you're quite happy with the job, there'll still be things about it you don't like. So nothing's ever perfect. You're just trying to get the best you can for yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, if people, and the problem with politics, the problem why people lose sight of that is because there's so many snake oil salesmen out there who will just peddle the easy answers. Oh, I can give you it all. I can give everyone everything.
Yeah.
And there's no drawback and it's all fine. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. I can deliver it all. This is why the Tories are in America. They keep talking about how Sunak's mucked this up, or Truss mucked this up, or Johnson mucked this up. That 29 coalition was never holding. You know, the Red Wall Tories who wanted the levelling up, the latest report now is there is no levelling up. In fact, only 10% of the funding's even been spent. And there are no levelling up projects you can point at and go, oh, that's been a benefit.
Yeah, our council here in Durham spent over £1.6 million bidding for money and got nothing.
So yeah, it's so the Red Wall Tories didn't go. But if they had got that, if the Tories had gone, levelling up there, the Blue Wall would have been pissed off, because it's like, hang on a minute, you're charging us more taxes so that you can help other people catch up to us. No.
Yeah.
So it was impossible. It didn't, all this nonsense about, Rishi Sunak's going to lose his coalition that Boris Johnson built up. Boris Johnson had already lost it. By the time he stepped down, he'd already lost it. It was impossible. He promised them everything. And even then, he probably wouldn't have got away with it if it weren't for the fact that he was also going, oh, you don't believe me? Oh, yeah, vote for Jeremy Corbyn then.
Well, this is a thing that I'd say in Labour's favour as well. And the difference between them and the Tories is Labour at the moment could just promise the moon because they know they're probably going to win the next election, whatever. So they could just make up a load of mad promises, like, to build a bridge and to, build a tunnel and to build whatever else, a helter-skelter outside the Olympic Stadium in London. I mean, Boris Johnson could just promise anything he wanted. We'll level up the north. We'll have a great new trade deal. So, but he knew that he would never have to follow through on it. He'll never have to. Yeah. Whereas Labour understand that if you say, we are going to do X, Y, Z, then you have to freaking well do it. And that's why they're perceived as being a lot more cautious. And they are a lot more cautious.
They have to admit to some of the trade-offs. There are still some trade-offs they don't. I know the Institute for Fiscal Studies was whining about them, who, for still not being completely honest about the realities of taxation and spending plans. Yeah. But by and large, they do. The trade-offs that are going to be apparent to the public, they have to be honest about because they're going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of trade deals, have you seen the news on the Australian trade deal?
Yes. What you mean that we haven't sold them?
We've imported a load of extra beef because obviously
20,000 tons of beef tariff-free from Australia. That's the new quota. How much have we sold them?
Nothing. Not a bean.
Not even a little tiny
sausage.
Packet of beef jerky because they won't accept it. Then I have to. Yeah. It's not part of the trade deal.
Exactly.
I've been saying this. I mean, obviously, this is my particular bugbear when it comes to Brexit, is that people are thick as pig shit when it comes to geography and the understanding of geopolitics and the fact that the vast majority of countries in the world are poor. They can't understand that. They can't get their head around it. It's a bit like trying to explain to someone who lives in a lovely little village in the Cotswolds how impoverished somewhere like Blackpool is. They just can't. They can't envisage it because their neighbourhood's lovely. Everywhere they drive to in their little neighbourhood is lovely. And we have that same problem in Europe. We go anywhere in Europe, pretty much, it's really nice. Even in Ukraine, which is having a war at the moment, the cities are lovely. There's some bloody lovely architecture. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about, in Kyiv and places like that. But, I mean, we just see that as normal. Oh yeah, every country's all right, aren't they? And it's like, no, the vast majority of countries out there have got bug of all. Exactly. There was only about 6 trade deals worth of Panascaus, and we've squandered 5 of them already. And then the last one is America, and they're not going to do a trade deal with us unless it's completely.
Oh no! Have you heard we've got a free trade agreement with Texas now?
which is worth nothing, literally
Oh.
zero. It's amount
Yeah.
of same
actually-
number as the amount of.
It is
beef that we
literally
can sell to
zero.
Australia.
Because a memorandum of understanding, I mean, first of all, when they say Brexit benefit, EU members can form, because all they are is a bit like, it's like advanced talks on what you'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
But so they can, in theory, save you a bit of time later on, because it's like sounding out some of the people who are being involved. But it is literally worthless in this case, because let us imagine a future in a few years' time, say, where for whatever reason, it suddenly became advantageous for the US to go, okay, we'll talk to you about a trade deal. It will be a completely different UK government, and they will not necessarily want the same things the Tories wanted. So that memorandum of understanding will be in the bin.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, look, we've gone over time. We've massively gone over time, but that's okay. We don't have to break for the news or advertising or anything. But thank you for joining us. Thanks to Phil for coming on this afternoon, and thanks to everyone in the chat and the super chat. Give us a like on the way out, because that helps the algorithm, helps people discover this channel. We still want to grow. We still want to grow on the election coming up. Tonight on the Labour Social, we've got Femi Olawale, and we've also got Alex Kerr from Political X will be joining us, along with some other guests around for maybe a couple of drinks, maybe a cup of tea. Maybe you'll hit the hard stuff, coffee. And we'll be spending a bit of time talking about what's been happening in the news. And I'm sure that if Ade Thompson's there, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about our pet theories on what's happened to Princess Kate, which we haven't mentioned because that's not really our zone. Yeah, anyway, thanks very much, Phil. Thanks everyone for watching.
No problem.
And until 9 o'clock tonight, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.